morning, another day, another real-world test. Today, we're doing it on the Apple iPhone 16 Pro Max, and I apologize that it's taking me a while to get all these videos out. You'll see why in a second. I also apologize if you watched my iPhone 16 Pro real-world test, as there's going to be a lot of overlap because they're very similar phones. Regardless, though, we will explore new places all while we test out this phone. But first things first.
Coffee. Check. And welcome to Coffee Check. I actually spent the last 8 months designing and building a coffee shop, coffee roastery, and a production space that you can rent out here in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. I'm sorry for the delay in me doing videos and content, but this is why. Now at the coffee shop, we have espresso drinks, multiple matchas from a great supplier, killer chais and teas from another. We bake pastries here. We just started doing pour-overs. We have cold brew, etc. I am trying my best to do this proper. Now, if you're in New York City, come check it out. I already have an amazing team of baristas here to help you with whatever you need. And if you're not here, I actually also partner with a local roastery while I wait for permits for my own roastery to create a medium light roast that we use as our main drip coffee here. And you can buy some of that yourself from the link below and let me know what you guys think. I really appreciate the support. I'll also definitely be making more roasts once I can roast here in the roastery, and I will eventually do a video tour of the place and put that here on YouTube. But in the meantime, I apologize, as I will be using my coffee shop in the beginning of these videos for a bit. Thank you again, though, for not getting annoyed at that too much, hopefully. All right, the phones feel and look very similar to last year's. We have the same matte glass backs, shiny rails, titanium frame that makes them lighter than the 14 series was. They do, however, have slightly larger displays, with the Pro Max having a 6.9-inch versus the 6.7-inch of last year. The screen is the same 120 Hz display as last year, with the same peak brightness, but this year it gets a lower brightness down to 1 nit from 2 nits. That just means it gets dimmer when it's dark to save power and not bother, say, your partner in bed as much. Now, some of this is down to smaller bezels, but also the phones are a hair larger in width and height. Honestly, I like the more screen look, and I don't mind the nominal size increase, about 3 and 1 millimeter gain in each direction. There's also a negligible weight gain for both devices this year, but nothing you'd notice, even if you're holding them side by side, honestly. Now, besides that, we lose the blue titanium color, which I did like a lot, and they've replaced it now with this new color of desert titanium, which very much reminds me of the iPhone XS back in the day that has a similar color. Personally, I'd either get the desert one or the titanium if it were me. Now, if you're looking to keep the design as pristine as possible for as long as possible, today's sponsor, TORRAS, the original designer of the O-shaped stand case, has some clever accessories to help with that. The first is their O-Stand 360 in solid and translucent back options. They all have rounded corners for a better in-hand feel, have a streamlined design instead of a cutout to make it easier to use the new camera control button. They have an 18N strength magnet to use with MagSafe accessories, and are even compatible with new Qi 2 chargers. The ring in the back is great for holding the case by, but also can be used as a stand for landscape or portrait, and has been tested to withstand up to 30,000 folds. It's a protective case with MagSafe, a phone grip, and a kickstand all in one. They also have a new screen protector with narrower bezels to match the new borders of the 16 Pro Max that is also super easy to install with just snapping it on and pulling to install it. It has an even better adhesive that's more transparent, so the displays look great still. It has industry-leading 100% coverage of the display and 12-foot military standard protection and scratch resistance with a 0.71 millimeter thickness for the perfect balance between protection and touch sensitivity. If you're interested, check them out at the link below, and thanks again to TORRAS for sponsoring this video. For a lot of people in this neighborhood near the coffee shop called Greenpoint, this church is probably one of the most iconic images of the neighborhood. This is St. Anthony of Padua, St. Alphonsus Parish, and it's a 240-foot high landmark staring straight down Milton Street, one of the streets in the Greenpoint Historic District that we checked out in the iPhone 16 Pro video, by the way. Now, it was built by one of the most famous American church architects in history, Patrick Keel of Ireland, who designed at least 600 churches across North America. It was completed in 1875. The facade is made of Philadelphia pressed brick and Nova Scotia freestone, and has 3 symmetrical sections, the central clock and steeple, and 2 lower sections, with each section having a pointed arced entrance. It also happens to be one of the only 2 identical houses of worship in New York City, as it was built in the same year by the same architect as the Church of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary at 130 Summit Street in Carroll Gardens. Now, speaking of identical things, the new iPhone 16 Pro and the 16 Pro Max now have the same exact cameras compared to last year. The iPhone 16 Pro now has the same 5x telephoto camera as the Pro Max, unlike last year where the 15 Pro had a 3x and the 15 Pro Max had a 5x. So now they both have the same cameras, and there's no need to buy this larger model just to get the further telephoto length. The only differences now are battery life and screen size. We now also have a new 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera that bins the pixels by default to get larger photo sites versus last year's model, which didn't, as well as the ability to shoot in the full 48 megapixels if you need the extra resolution. As with all cameras like this, it's better to use that mode in better lighting, as the higher resolution trade-off is that you get lower light sensitivity. Now, we don't get the Fusion camera, the name that they dubbed for their main camera, that actually combines the 48 megapixel resolution we have from last year, still with the binned 12 megapixel image, to get a 24 megapixel image that sort of has the best of both worlds, is the idea. So I wonder if they'll add that to the ultra-wide at some point on the maybe 17 Pro. Who knows? But either way, the higher resolution and, more importantly to me, larger sensor ultra-wide is definitely welcomed, and it looks great. Also, that ultra-wide still can be used as a macro camera as well, and we still have the 2x option, which crops out the 12 megapixel center of the 48 megapixel main camera to get a pretty solid 2x optical zoom from there, like a lot of companies are doing now. You just lose the larger pixels, so the low light won't be as good as, say, a dedicated larger 2x camera. In addition to the hardware changes, the processing has changed slightly as well, and as per the usual, since it's more and more a subjective thing these days, I'll let you guys be the judge of what you see in the images and video samples here in this video as to which you prefer. Speaking of subjective camera things, Photographic Styles has been updated. Unlike the filters on your phone that add a blanket effect across the entire image, similar to like an Instagram filter, compared to Photographic Styles, which debuted last year on the iPhone 15 Pro series. The difference here is that they affect different parts of the image specifically, similar to how LUTs maybe work on video content. They know what a person is and adjust skin tone specifically, they adjust the sky specifically, etc., etc. New this year, though, is that they are non-destructive. So that means whatever style you choose when shooting the photo, so long as you're shooting in HEIF format, by the way, you can then undo and or change after the fact, which is nice. You can also fine tweak them using these graphs on each and save them as a new version as well. You can also adjust the tone, which basically lets you undo some of the HDR boosting to the shadows as it does by default. Now, I personally prefer to have the shadows myself be brightened and prefer the way phones handle these things now, as I'd rather just have that data and then pull the shadows back down in post before I share it, but maybe that's just me. And this at least does let you control that before you shoot and even leave it that way, like with the Photographic Styles, to create your own presets, basically. And finally, one of the more interesting changes we have this year, we have a new camera control button, and it's actually kind of clever. You can now use it to launch the camera, which saves me having to use the action button for that, which can now be used for something else. But in addition to it being a button that when pressed launches the camera and also takes a photo, you can also hold it down for video, it has a capacitive haptic surface. So you can tap lightly while in the camera without actually pressing down on the button part of it, and that will then bring up one of a variety of camera options that you can then adjust by swiping along the control. You can also double tap to change the option that you want to have here. It's clever, and it is useful for doing zoom instead of pinching on the screen. It's still faster to just tap the camera icons on the screen, though, if you wanted to go to those specific lengths, which you honestly should really only ever use. But I do also like it for exposure compensation instead of tapping and holding on the screen and then sliding up and down, or using the on-screen option at the top, and aperture adjustments in portrait mode, as it's more seamless than tapping it all on the screen maybe. Cameras, as mentioned though, feel faster to just tap the existing controls on the display, and the new Photographic Styles now have their own ever-present button at the top that feels faster to tap and then swipe on the screen instead of using the button as well. Also, there's something about swiping that just feels awkward to me, and I haven't really got used to it. But let me know if you get the phone, if you do get used to it. This is Troost, and it's a tiny bar that's a local dive a few blocks from the coffee shop. Opened back in 2011, it's still going strong and not much has changed. They have live music some days here in the front of the space, so it's what you would call an intimate venue for that. But in the back, they have a backyard that you can sit in and drink your beer, wine, or a cocktail when the weather is nice. Okay, for video, we now have 4K 120 FPS instead of just 60. You can also choose to shoot that in SDR or HDR color spaces, with the HDR option being Dolby Vision. The benefit of shooting in 120 FPS is the ability to either play it back ultra smooth if someone has a 120 Hz screen and you're exporting it at 120 FPS, or playback as normal speed. Or you can also slow it up to 1/5 of the speed for very smooth slow motion. And you can just shoot and decide which of those you might want to do with the footage after the fact. I enjoyed using it on the Xperia 1 Mark IV a couple years back, and this is just a better looking version of that straight out of the phone, so that's great. Audio Mix is also new and now allows you to adjust noise cancellation for a video that you shot to isolate voices using algorithms and the 4 new mics Apple has added to the Pro models. You can choose from the standard, which is the normal sound.
But something lost time. But if you put them to a click, they'll line up.
Oh, no. Nick was saying they were not playing.
In frame, which isolates the voices of the people in the camera's view.
But something lost time. But if you put them to a click, they'll line up.
Oh, no. Nick was saying they were not playing.
Studio, which does the same but adds extra noise canceling and boosts the gain.
But something lost time. But if you put them to a click, they'll line up.
Oh, no. Nick was saying they were not playing.
And Cinematic, which isolates all the voices around you and makes them sound like they're all coming from the front, like a movie kind of would, is the idea.
But something lost time. But if you put them to a click, they'll line up.
Oh, no. Nick was saying they were not playing.
Okay, now we have to talk about Apple Intelligence. It isn't coming until 18.1 later in October, but here are some of the features coming then. Siri, as you would expect as the virtual assistant of the iPhone, has gotten some upgrades from the new Apple Intelligence editions. Siri has a new animation and can now work while you still use your phone, as well as not being stopped by your ums and ahs, changing your mind mid-request, etc. You can also type to Siri by double-tapping at the bottom instead of talk, which is handy for obvious reasons. And in the future, Siri will also be getting ChatGPT integration for being better at answering questions, as well as being able to tap into mail and messages for context. So you can ask her about your upcoming flight or maybe an order from a website, provided that that info is in an email, for example. But since none of that is available, even in the beta right now, we'll see how that works down the road. We have writing tools, which you've probably seen on Samsung and Google devices at this point, and the idea here is the same. Selecting text lets you then proofread, rewrite, summarize, and other options to interact with that text, and uses an on-device AI to help with those things. The most handy of these, I feel like, is proofreading and summarizing notifications, actually, as it definitely helps triage the otherwise overwhelming iOS notification system, which is a great use for that. There's a handy transcribing option for voice notes, and even phone calls. It alerts both parties that they are being recorded before starting in order to comply with laws. But all of that works as well as it does on any other device, and it's also handy to have. We also have other things that we've seen on other devices, like Cleanup, which lets you erase things like Magic Eraser has, Image Playground, which lets you generate images, and Genmoji, which lets you create your own emoji to share between other iOS users, etc. Now, as with all AI features we've seen on phones, some of these are more useful than others, but bottom line is that Apple is now catching up to all the other AI features launched by Samsung and Google. And time will tell if and how they become a part of each of our own specific workflows, regardless of which device you might own. Now, for battery, here is my screen on time and my usage for anyone who cares about that for today. But today was a real-world test day, and I used my camera way more than you ever would. So here is another day that was not a real-world test day, so that you have something else to compare it to. Now, overall, the battery life is excellent. Last year, it was one of the best battery life of a phone I tested, and this year, it's definitely keeping that title still. In part, probably thanks to an even larger battery this year as well.
And there you go. Let me know what you guys think of the phone in the comments below. Always appreciate hearing from you guys. And I will leave the best price that I can find on the new iPhone 16 Pro Max in the description as well. Also, if you're interested, please check out the TORRAS accessories. I will leave a link below for that. And thanks to them for sponsoring this video. Also, if you'd like to try my coffee, I'll leave a link below for that as well. Appreciate the support. But for now, I'm exhausted and it's time for bed. Good night.